my little one. So if I go off camera or get distracted, this is why, because he's been great all day, slept most of the night, and so it's probably time to start fussing, which we were just doing a little bit of, but generally he's pretty happy right now, so it's good. So. Oh, his name is Carter, and he is a month old.
And here's just a couple of quick reminders about tonight's event. You probably heard it is being recorded and will be shared out with attendees and those who registered and weren't able to make it, as well as shared on our website. Just that reminder about being muted and taking advantage of that chat feature, or you can use the raise hand feature to ask questions, and we'll take pauses during the presentation so that our experts can address your questions while they're hot off the press. And we also invite you to submit recipes that you recommend, healthy recipes. We'll also send a follow-up email with a reminder, and we'll try to compile them for everyone. So with that, Leah Beth, if you want to go ahead and introduce our speakers for this evening, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so starting, we have Jill Thiede. She's a third-year medical student, I believe at SIU Springfield, correct? And then we have Dr. Wells also presenting today.
He wants to talk too. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides. Hello, everybody. I'm glad you all can make it tonight. And again, just feel free to ask any questions as we go. Jenny will kind of collect those for us, or raise your hand, whatever you feel comfortable doing, and we'd be happy to answer any questions as we go. All righty. And Jenny, just checking, you can all see my screen.
We got you. Go ahead.
Great. Okay. So tonight we're just going to do a general overview of some nutrition knowledge to kind of keep in the back of your brain as you're going through rotations or you're seeing patients in the clinic. Nutrition's a super common thing to come up no matter what subject you're counseling on. So I just wanted to kind of give a little overview tonight of those things. And just to start tonight, we do have a small group, so hopefully we can all maybe talk to each other a little bit. But I was just wondering if you guys could have anything or go anywhere for dinner tonight, what or where would it be?
My spouse is picking up Indian food as we speak.
Gosh. And go ahead and introduce yourself too whenever you, maybe where you're from or what school you're at.
I'm Lily Rolfe. I'm from Rush. I'm an M3.
Nice to meet you. Anybody else want to introduce themselves? Sushi. Yes, that is mine as well, for sure. That's what I would have said. I love sushi, and every time I go to California as well, that's like the first thing I get whenever I travel. So love sushi. And Jenny had some amazing Syrian food. Sounds delicious.
I would say breakfast for dinner. That's probably my favorite thing, my go-to. And I'm Emily from SIU as well.
Emily, solid choice. I like it. All righty. Well, again, feel free. I'm happy to get to know my fellow med students here in Illinois. So nice to get to know a couple of you. All righty. So kind of some general things that I like to keep in mind before, doing any sort of counseling or talking about any sort of nutrition is kind of the general environment that we're in as well. The food system, we love to think about this as a part of counseling and also just kind of a part of our general everyday today. Illinois is a great just instance of the ecosystem we have. We have everything from like crop and animal production in our state, especially being down in Springfield, driving from Springfield to my home closer to St. Louis. I'm going through, lots of cornfields, soybean fields, and those are all part of our food system. We have our food chain workers who may be our patients. So you might have farmers, you might have seasonal migrant workers, processing, people working in storefronts as well, or restaurants, and all those things, all those places can kind of influence our health. We have to kind of keep in mind some safety things. So like the FDA is going to be regulating some food. It's also in charge of regulating some supplements, and that we'll get into that a little bit later. But also like the USDA is responsible for a portion of that safety. And then whenever we do potentially have illness or outbreak, we are working with the CDC. We have to think about the marketing of food. So whether that's in the grocery store, how things are placed, even I know at like our junior highs and high schools, a lot of times those even scoreboards in the basketball arenas or football stadiums, those are oftentimes sponsored by companies like Coca-Cola. So marketing is everywhere really. And we also have to consider access and waste with our patients, as well as just policy. So is WIC policy or SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program policy, affecting what our patients can and cannot get access to? As with many topics these days, I always like to consider the social determinants of health as well whenever we're counseling our patients. So we have to consider what is the health needs, kind of based on our health assessment of the patient, but also what is the patient's personal goals, what is their motivation, and then what is their built environment, what's their house, do they have refrigeration, do they have something to cook with, do they have a body that they're able to do those things in. Access, are they able to just go to the grocery store, it's 2 minutes away, or is the nearest grocery store out in town 10 miles away? Is it the nearest store a corner store? Education, that's kind of the part that we're always talking about, trying to educate our patients. So what is the health literacy level of our patients? And then as well as economics. So again, what can patients afford? What fits into their day-to-day life? So all things to kind of consider as we talk about nutrition and talk about any sort of counseling we do. We also have cultural considerations. So this is from Old Ways, and they do a lot of work with just different types of cultural foods and kind of getting back to some of those. But it's something that we need to think about whenever we're counseling patients. I like to think about the My Plate that is super prevalent. We can give patients a plate and say, this is what your plate should look like. But what if the plate is a bowl and there's maybe rice at the bottom and meat or veggies and stuff on top? It's not going to look kind of separated like a maybe traditional American plate might. So that's something to think about just with our handouts. And then also, what kind of foods are we recommending? Are we telling a patient whose maybe main foods are rice and beans that rice and beans are bad for them? Something like that, like really being considerate of kind of where other people are and what other people's backgrounds are, because every different kind of culture can be integrated with like a healthy diet, and many traditional diets are very, very healthy. Again, Old Ways does a great job explaining some foods from different regions that are really great to incorporate into our day-to-day lives. So kind of the first section that I wanted to cover tonight is diets in the hospital. So it can be a little overwhelming, your first time on the hospital ward. Maybe your patient gets put on this heart healthy diet or some other diet, and you go into the room and they're a little frustrated because, oh, the person on the phone told me that I can't get X thing. Why is that? Or, I'm really scared. I just had this, heart problem that I didn't know I had before. What do I need to be doing at home to deal with this? And those are things that we should be prepared to talk about whenever we go into the room. So the first one I wanted to talk about is this heart healthy diet. This is one I see all the time on the floor. Maybe a patient who had an MI or a patient with a history of CHF comes in and they're put on a heart healthy diet. And that usually what that means is that there's some sort of sodium restriction. So could be 2 grams of sodium, could be 1.5 grams of sodium. And then there's oftentimes a cholesterol restriction with that as well. So the 300 milligrams is kind of the general range, but they can change depending on what your patient is there for, as well as kind of what your hospital policies are. But that means that whenever they're calling down to get food, they might be limited on the items that they can get to stay within those numbers for their daily meals. So some things to think about with these patients is talking about, okay, what kind of food choices can we make to help keep you at home longer? So if you have a patient maybe with CHF, can we talk about sodium before we go home to talk about which foods should we avoid or which foods should we add in to try to keep us those medications working correctly and keep us at home for longer, staying healthy. Looking at our label, we can talk about how we have our calories here at the top, but then we can look down at our cholesterol numbers and our sodium numbers and talk about, ranges to keep those numbers under. A really great tips are, talk about frozen foods, talking about if we're doing canned foods, trying to do low sodium options. And then also whenever we're going home, just talking about, hey, processed foods, that's where most Americans get their salt. It's a lot of times I hear patients tell me, oh, I don't add salt to my foods. Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're trying to find other spices maybe that work. But a lot of times our salt is actually coming from, those frozen Hungry Man meals or from getting a pizza out, those sorts of things. So we can talk about how do we add that into our diet, and then maybe we can add in, microwave a pack of frozen vegetables to go on the side if we're going to eat out, to try to kind of balance out where we're getting, what kinds of foods we're eating to help make ourselves full. The renal diet, this one is really complicated just because there's a lot of stuff going on. This diet is generally ordered for patients with severe chronic kidney disease and oftentimes usually prior to dialysis. A lot of times we're watching the protein amount, so our meat amount can be limited, as well as poultry, eggs, dairy, and some even like legumes, plant-based protein. Sometimes we're decreasing those as well. There's also oftentimes a phosphorus restriction, and that can come from meat, but also dairy, also dark sodas like colas. There can be a potassium restriction, so that can even limit the amounts of fruits and vegetables we're eating. And then there's oftentimes a fluid restriction as well. And it's really good to have kind of a list of what foods can I choose to try to continue to have a healthy diet while also trying to follow all of these restrictions. I've attached one from this Beyond Bananas campaign because, a lot of times we think bananas, high potassium, what other things can we eat though? And so some options might be an apple, blackberries, rice, asparagus, all those sorts of things. And we can kind of talk about how do we make a healthy meal around that. It's also really important to maybe connect these patients with a dietitian, as well as their nephrologist or their renal team, just because there are so many moving parts. And then also this diet changes. So once we start dialysis, our protein needs go up considerably. And so that's something that if they've been on, this low protein diet for a long time, or they've been really trying to follow it, they might need some help kind of adjusting. And of course, dialysis might also change our needs for other things, oftentimes like potassium or phosphorus. Those sorts of things might get changed a little bit. Just want to check the chat here. Okay. All righty. And then the final diet that we see oftentimes in the hospital, kind of these are my big three, would be a carb control diet. So again, this diet, I hear patients a lot of times like go into a room and they said, well, I wanted a sandwich with chips and some fruit and then dessert. And then they told me I couldn't have X thing. And I don't understand why I can't have that. So a lot of times in the hospital, a carb control diet, they'll get 4 to 5 or even 3 to 5 food carbohydrate choices per meal. And a carbohydrate choice is usually around 15 grams of carbohydrates. It's about 1 serving. And this used to kind of be, it's called the exchange. And so this used to be how we taught a lot of patients how to count carbohydrates. So, 15 grams is about 1 slice of bread. It's about 1/4 of a bagel. It's about, a small apple, a small orange, a half of a banana. All those things are about 15 grams. And again, 3 to 5 servings of those carbohydrates per meal and about 2 servings at a snack. So for example, a sample meal plan for a day might include like 6 servings of fruit, 6 servings of whole grains or beans, 2 servings of milk. And if explaining this to a patient, it might be helpful to go over a nutrition label before sending them home. And so the number one thing, we have to find the serving size because that can really change based on your product. As we all know, like it can be, 1 chip or it could be a whole bag of chips, depending on what the product is. So that's really important. And then the second thing is just going down to the carbohydrates. We find those, this is 22 grams, so it's a little over a choice. So, say this is the snack. So maybe 1 of these plus some cheese or plus something else might make a good snack. And then, this is counting the choices. So if you were to send somebody home, counting the choices. So that's one way to do it. Another way we see a lot of patients with diabetes and sending them home on a carb control diet might be insulin ratios. So what that means is that for every 10 grams or every 15 grams of carbohydrates you eat, you might need 1 or 2 units of that fast acting insulin. And of course that's, a prescription, but it can be helpful to be able to talk to your patients about that. So can we talk to them about finding the serving size, finding those total carbohydrates, and then we're adding them up for the meal. And then based on how many carbohydrates we have for a meal, say we had 60 carbohydrate grams and our insulin ratio was 1 to 15, we might have 4 units of insulin at that time. So just some kind of general understanding of 1, how to describe that diet to your patient, and then 2, what different regimens might look like. Some other things to really consider is continuing to eat fiber, proteins, and healthy fats, including those all in your diet. And then, the complexity is really important as well. So especially whenever we talk about carbohydrates, different foods are going to impact people differently. So a piece of white bread is probably more likely to increase your blood sugars quickly than something like a piece of whole wheat bread with nuts, or a piece of whole wheat bread with, some peanut butter on it. And then also there are foods like, I know whenever I worked with children with diabetes, like pizza, we might only have 1 slice that might only be, 15, 30 grams of carbohydrates, but we might see a really big blood sugar jump, even with a small piece of pizza, just because a couple of hours later, because different food items like the fat or the protein included on the pizza might increase our blood sugars later. So just working with your patients over time, because as they learn how their body reacts to different foods, they'll be able to kind of change their diet accordingly, or just know that like, hey, I might have a high a little later on if I choose to eat this food. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a completely bad thing or I should never have it, but I just know that this might increase my sugars differently than what I might expect just based on the carbohydrate. Does anybody have any questions for kind of the diets within the hospital? If you do, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll try to see it and get to it appropriately. Okay. Okay, so some popular diets within the clinic. So of course, we see these patients in the hospital, they might be prescribed a diet, or you might be seeing a patient in the clinic. You're just doing your regular screening. You screen like an A1C, or maybe a patient just comes in and wants to talk to you about a diet. Kind of having some general information to base that conversation off of, I thought would be helpful as well. So as a dietitian, especially as a dietitian, learning, going to school over the past, 5 to 10 years, I always get asked about the ketogenic diet. I think that's the first thing people ask me about most of the time after I say I am a dietitian. And, it's been very popular over the past almost 10 years now. And what the ketogenic diet is, it's just a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. Traditionally, this was done in ratios. So there were like 5 grams of carb for every 1 gram of protein, 5 grams of fat for every 1 gram of protein and carbohydrate you had. And it was measured out pretty stringently, especially because a lot of times this ketogenic diet was being used for epilepsy control. So the first kind of patients I saw really doing this were children or adolescents or families with epilepsy, and they would, very strictly kind of measure out their fats. They were checking their ketones in the urine very regularly, and this can really help them with symptom relief. So that's actually one of like the big prospects of the diet. Are there diseases the ketogenic diet might be good for? So epilepsy is definitely one of them that we know works well. And so if you ever do have a patient who comes into maybe like the ER or who comes into your clinic and there are ketones in the urine, but they're following this diet, that might be on purpose. So that's something to kind of maybe assess too whenever we're checking, whenever we're evaluating patients. Another prospect of the ketogenic diet, and this is probably why it gets brought up all the time, is there is weight loss. A lot of times patients start a ketogenic diet and they lose weight very quickly. We know some of this is kind of like water weight or isn't exactly a long-term solution, but there is some weight loss and there may be a potential for blood sugar control. So this is still being studied, but especially patients maybe with a history of diabetes, they're trying this out because they're like, oh, well, I know that these carbohydrates really affect my blood sugar. What if I tried to diet that was, more fat-based and less carbohydrate-based? So this diet, however, of course, also comes with some pitfalls. One kind of story I like to think about whenever I think of the ketogenic diet was I have a friend, we can call him Pete, in college, and he and his girlfriend decided to start on the ketogenic diet and to try to lose some weight. We've gained the freshman 20, the freshman 30, even though we're seniors at this point, and we just he wanted to lose some weight. So he comes home the first day and he'd gone to the grocery store ready to start this diet, and he brought home a block of Velveeta, like 3 things of those little pepperoni slices, and I think some like ham and bologna and other deli meats, because, all of those things are great on the ketogenic diet, right? Well, we know that those foods aren't really great for our bodies, especially in those high amounts, or if that's all we're eating. We're not getting any fiber in. We're probably not going to get a lot of nutrient diversity in our bodies. So there can be really like big concerns for if we're not sure how to implement a diet like this correctly or in a healthy way. I have also seen people who are following what they think is a keto diet, or what they call a keto diet, I guess. And they are still eating a lot of like fruits, vegetables are included. There's, still fat and meat heavy, but they're getting a much broader micronutrient diversity in their diet. And, that might be a healthier way to go about it. So whenever a patient comes in and they're asked about the ketogenic diet, we want to make sure that we know what kind of path they are trying to go down with this, what they think they need to be eating on it, what they are eating on their diet at home, because we really want to make sure that we're having a good, diet quality, some good diet diversity whenever we're doing this at home. It can also be restrictive. So, if we're cutting out almost a whole food group, it can be really hard to sustain this in the long term. So we might see that quick weight loss, but then, we come around the holidays and it's really hard to like enjoy Thanksgiving without your pumpkin pie or without your rolls or something along those lines. And over time, it's much harder to kind of stick with something like this. And then the third kind of pitfall that we're still learning more about is whether or not this diet actually leads to long-term weight loss. Does it lead to blood sugar control? The science isn't there yet, as well as are we concerned that it might be increasing inflammation, especially if we're doing this diet, in the way of my college friend who's having like Velveeta and pepperoni slices. It's probably not putting your body in a really great state. So I don't want to ever say that like you can't do a diet, that whatever diet is best for you is the one that fits into your lifestyle best and it's going to keep you like healthiest. It's a diet that you can stick to, but there can be, both good things and bad things coming out of following a plan like this. Kind of contrasting, one of the diets that tends to rank highest, especially whenever we're talking about like the US Health Review, News and Health Review, they tend to rank the Mediterranean diet and DASH diet pretty high on the list. It's high up there, not only because of the health benefits, but also because it's fairly practical. We can add vegetables and fruits. And, we all kind of know that we need to be limiting some of those like sugary beverages, sweets, and processed foods. So these diets, especially the Mediterranean one, are also associated with the blue zones, which are just an interesting thing to look up if you've never heard of them. It's the areas of the world where people live longest. So there's a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, grains, and we're limiting sweets, we're limiting more processed foods, and they tend to have, higher physical activity. And then I also like these plans because it could be a starting place for adding things rather than trying to restrict things. So one of the best ways to kind of talk about things with patients is, maybe we're not restricting our weekly, eating at a fast food restaurant, but maybe whenever we are at home, we can add, a side of a vegetable to one of the meals we're eating. Or maybe we can add a fruit with our breakfast on our grab and go. We can grab and go a banana, even if we're going to go through the drive-through, or just adding different things to our diet can add that diversity, can start to add more nutrients to our diet without, starting off with kind of restriction. So this part is near and dear to my heart. Whenever I was working as a dietitian, I was in pediatrics. So it can be, a different challenge to talk to kids rather than to be talking to adults, or, to talk to parents rather than to just be talking about adults about their own health. And the best model I've kind of found to have this discussion is from Ellen Satter. She's a dietitian and a behavioral counselor or a psychologist. And she came up with this division of responsibility. And in the division of responsibility, we talk about parents being responsible for what, when, and where we're eating. So what we're eating, parents, what are we bringing into the home? That's the kind of the first place we start. This can also be the most difficult because parents know that maybe their one child that they are concerned about at that visit is not the only child that's in the home. It's maybe not the only person. There may be multiple generations living in the home. So this can be a difficult thing, but it is one thing to consider. They're also responsible for when. So when are we eating? Are we eating just whenever we feel like opening the pantry? Are kids snacking all day? Are we having set kind of snack times, meal times? When are we eating? And then also where? So are we eating in front of the TV? Are we eating at a table? Are we eating at a table all together? Are we eating at a table one-on-one with tablets, distractions, those kinds of things? So for parents, it can be really great to kind of take charge of those three things. But then also at the same time, a lot of parents have a lot of kind of feeling of guilt for the things that the kids are responsible for. And so we're going to try to take those things away from, the parents' plate there. Kids are responsible for how much and whether. So with enough time, we know that our kids are pretty good at regulating their own bodies, understanding their hunger cues, if we're able to kind of support that. So kids are responsible for how much. So are they going to eat the whole plate that day, or are they, just going to nibble and be done and be on to something else? They're also responsible for whether. So are they going to eat it all? Again, maybe they're not going to eat the thing that you put on the plate. And that's their responsibility. Your responsibility is what you're serving as a parent, and the kids is whether or not they're going to eat it. And those are, kind of setting those boundaries. It's also kind of taking the pressure off kind of comments. So I know that I grew up, especially in an era that was like, finish your plate, or you're not getting, dessert or playtime, that sort of thing. And so we're really taking comments off of maybe to like, be a good girl, and or if you eat this, you get dessert, those sorts of things. And by just being responsible for what, when, and where, parents can kind of take their pressure off, don't have to bribe, we don't have to make this into a fight over whether or not you're going to eat the thing. That part's not your responsibility. And so we can kind of just focus on your part. And sometimes this kind of these changes can take a little bit of time. Parents can be concerned. They can say, well, they're not going to eat this thing. And in general, for most kids, with enough reinforcement, they will over time kind of start to, they will get hungry and they will eat. So we're not so concerned about that over time. But it can take time to relearn our hunger cues and those sorts of things. I did link the resource for Ellen Satter's website at the end, which I think is a really great resource because she also talks about some things like, for example, she suggests keeping one thing on the table all the time that's like kind of a neutral thing that kids are going to eat. So sometimes for some families that might be like, having bread with every meal, or having like a little bit of rice, something like that, just to kind of keep something on the plate. Yes, is there one food that Jenny's hated as a child? Mine was a dish that it was like a rice and chicken cooked dish, but my mom added pineapple and oranges, and it was all baked, so they were warm. And I remember like having to sit at the table. I could not leave until I ate the whole thing. And I still to this day, like, I think that's why I don't like pineapple on my pizza, because I can't do warm fruit. So I'm working on it because my husband loves pineapple on pizza, but day by day. Asparagus, liver, yes. Fish, okra and smoked fish, peas. Yes, that's another one that was hard for our family. My mom would make tuna casserole with peas, and my brother would open up every single different shell to make sure there were no peas inside before taking a bite. So can relate to that one. Okay. Alrighty, so knowing that kind of framework that I was talking about with kids, kids being responsible for whether and how much, that kind of changes as we get into adolescence. As you know, we're starting to make our own food choices. We are going out with friends. We might have our own money to spend. We might be working at a restaurant, a common place to work whenever you're 16, 15, you know, around that age. So, oops, sorry. That can be kind of something that we have to have a conversation about as we're getting older, you know, taking on the responsibility for what we're eating and when we're eating and how, you know, how much. So some things to kind of keep in mind whenever we're talking about adolescents is that they may be more impacted, or they might be, you know, spending time on social media. A lot of social media has diet trends, you know, always trending in the For You pages, and that can really influence how people eat. For example, TikTok has a "What I Eat in the Day" challenge. It's known to, you know, show some people who, you know, might wake up in the morning, they're eating an orange and they eat a shake, and that's about all that, you know, that person is eating in their day, and it can kind of influence disordered eating behaviors. The other thing is, you know, kind of the other way is people eating maybe like a lot of pizza or processed foods, but they're labeling it as like a cheat day, or kind of labeling foods as, you know, completely bad, and that can also bring about some guilt as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. A lot of times with adolescents, at least in my experience, if there is a big change, you know, if we all of a sudden notice a sharp weight loss or a sharp weight gain, we might want to ask what happened, because sometimes those big changes can be influenced maybe by, you know, are we having some disordered eating? Was there a trauma that occurred that has changed eating habits? Because sometimes those eating behaviors can be associated with different like emotions, and you know, might just be something to assess. I also highly suggest watching out for any nutrition advice from influencers selling things. So if somebody is trying to sell you something, there's not really a guarantee that that thing is going to be any good for you, besides in making that influencer money. Supplements, like I said, are, you know, kind of under the FDA, but the FDA doesn't regulate every single supplement unless they get a warning about it, in which case they might investigate. So a lot of supplements, you know, we don't know exactly what's in them. We don't know if they're going to help you at all. They might have something that actually could be harmful to you in them. So being aware. The ones that I see the most often in patients, and maybe not adolescents, but, you know, young adults, is patients using Herbalife or It Works. And these things might promote a short-term weight loss, but you might want to be asking, like, what is the rest of the diet like? Are there other things that we should be incorporating? Are we, you know, losing any nutrients out by doing programs like that? Also, any nutrition advice from people selling diet plans. Illinois is one of the states where you can't be selling diet plans unless you're certified to do that, whether it's in your scope of practice. So that's people who are dietitians. And then of course, physicians are also giving out advice as well, you know, based kind of on what's going on. But you know, nutritionist is not a protected word, so anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. And then, you know, anybody can be a wellness coach, those sorts of things. So just, you know, watching out for people selling things like that. So some of the key takeaways for counseling patients, we're considering our patient health needs and our goals. You know, goals can be different for everybody. It might just be, hey, I want to work on my, you know, health behaviors associated. I notice I'm feeling super restrictive and then binging. Can we work on that? It might be, you know, a specific health related goal. So maybe they've been told by a fertility specialist that, you know, losing weight might help them, you know, promote fertility. So maybe that's one thing they want to work on. So they want to work on getting their body ready for pregnancy while also making sure that they're, you know, in their healthiest state. So what is the goal there? We also are considering the environment. So what kind of resources do they have to support them? What's their, you know, day-to-day like? As a physician, just knowing your community resources. So knowing where are the food banks, when are they open? What other resources are there? So some communities, for example, match SNAP dollars or WIC dollars at farmers markets. So is your community one of those? You know, those sorts of things can be very helpful whenever you're talking to a patient. Also determining what is your best way of screening and assessing patients. You know, not every patient at every visit is going to want to talk about nutrition, and that's okay. But do we need to talk to them? You know, if we notice a big change, are there certain things we want to talk about if we have a lab result that comes back that might be high or something? Is there something that we need to talk to them about then? And then also assessment. So I like to just kind of a quick way can just be to kind of ask about like, what's your typical day like? Some people like to get a food log and look back at that to kind of determine any counseling, areas for counseling. And then also following up or referring out if needed. So, you know, following up regularly, also connecting with the dietitian might be helpful. Connecting with behavioral health can often be helpful as well. Knowing if you're out of your league. So like, for example, patients with active eating disorders, I would not treat as a, you know, when I was in the pediatric endocrinology clinic, because, you know, to some patients, what you can say can, you know, actually harm them more than help them. And so you want to make sure that the people working with them are super well specialized at what they do and can really help support them. So, you know, referring out whenever you need. And then also knowing that eating lasts your whole life. So, you know, even if you do want to follow a more DASH diet or Mediterranean diet style of eating, things might change, you know, on a day-to-day, and it's more about the pattern than, you know, each day being perfect. And then I also, you know, love this quote. I haven't really found anything better to describe what, you know, a healthy eating style is in my mind. That's just eating food. So making sure you're trying to eat real food whenever you can, whether that be, you know, frozen broccoli or fruit or like grains, trying to not eat too much of anything, you know, anything, even good things too much of them can become a bad thing. And then, you know, centering mostly plants, because we know that adding fruits and veggies is always helpful. Strong community garden network. That is amazing. Yeah, that's a really great resource to tap into, especially if they're, you know, at farmers markets, or if you can, you know, donate time to receive food, anything like that. Those are some really great resources. One of the questions submitted with registration are there artificial sweeteners other than stevia, which are better than or could potentially replace sugar? So there are artificial sweeteners other than stevia. I don't know about better than, but some of them are like saccharin, aspartame, I know like xylitol, erythritol, sucralose, all of those are, you know, other sweeteners. They're in, you know, various products. Some of them you can buy, you know, in like the baking aisle to bake your food. I don't know about better than. So I think that they have pros and cons, right? So like if I have a patient who might be just trying to control blood sugars and we're drinking 32 ounces of soda every morning, and that could be really impacting our blood sugar on a day-to-day basis. Well, you know, maybe for that patient, a diet soda with artificial sweetener might be a better option, you know, kind of determining what their goal is. The things I kind of say as far as like pros and cons, you know, we don't know 100% how our body responds to it. There was a recent article that says that some of the neurons in our gut that might respond to sugar aren't the same ones that respond to those artificial sweeteners. And then also, are we making up for that replacement later? So a lot of times, if our body is not really considering that like a true sugar, a true calorie, maybe later on in our day, we're thinking, oh, well, I had a diet soda with breakfast, so I can have a large cookie this afternoon. So we might be kind of making up for that sugar later, and just kind of being aware of those kind of mind changes that we, make based on the diet drink or the diet option that we choose. Also taste, some people prefer a certain taste than others. I know some people love their, like diet Dr. Pepper, and if they just like the taste better, that's, okay too. So I think of it, drinks, especially as kind of like a range, with water being on one end and then, super sugary beverages on the other. So there's a lot of choices in between those. So this part of the talk is on our food as medicine chapter of the MIG. So I will hand it over to Dr. Wells.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jill, for that. That was a very good presentation. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Food is Medicine member interest group. And so encourage everyone to join. And as you can see on the screen there, you can email Jenny if you'd like to join. I'm the chair. I'm a family medicine physician. I work at the Miles Square Health Center in Cicero. And I see Jenny here has listed some of the resources that are on the website. And we're really just trying to continue to build the member interest group, hoping to do some things in the future, such as webinars, advocacy. And so we're really looking to expand. And so that means that we need all people on deck, and we need different viewpoints so that we can have varied programs and be able to reach a wide variety of audiences. So definitely would encourage everyone to join. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the member interest group that I might be able to answer. No, maybe not. I also just, Jill, you did an excellent job on your presentation. I wanted to kind of chime in and give you guys just a little bit of information and try to say that if one of the best ways to understand how to treat a patient's illness is to understand the pathophysiology of disease. So that might be something to think about as you're counseling your patients. Oh yeah, and here is Dr. Figueroa and Dr. Alex Wu. They founded the Pilsen Food Pantry, and they're always looking for volunteers. So if ever you want to go and volunteer there, you can contact Dr. Figueroa. I've been there. It's really, really excellent. They've had to change up a few things due to COVID, and they also moved to a new building maybe about a year ago. But Dr. Figueroa is great. I was actually at the Miles Square South Shore Clinic for about 10 years before I moved to the Cicero Clinic. And before I left there, we did a pop-up pantry through our clinic. And the food that we got was supplied from Dr. Figueroa and Dr. Wu's food pantry in Pilsen. So we're very grateful to be able to partner with them for that initiative. Yes, there are, Jenny, amazing food pantry programs associated with family medicine residency programs and med schools. They also have a program through, I know, West Suburban. Their family medicine department has, hopefully they're still doing it, but I know they do like a food pantry type of deal too, and they do food prescriptions. So they're also good as well. And I'm here if anybody has any questions.
I'm not sure if anybody has seen Encanto, but one of the characters' gifts in that movie is healing people, and she does it through food. And I think that's kind of perfect for our MIG group.
Right, definitely, definitely, definitely.
Alrighty, so a couple of the other resources I did want to give as well. Of course, our MIG page has a lot of really great ones that have been compiled. Another really great thing to join is if you go to your AFP membership portal, is if you join like the lifestyle medicine group. They have a lot of physicians who email back and forth with, papers that have recently come out. They discuss them in kind of the forum there, and just, each new advance. So that's kind of a really great way to stay up to date on what's going on in the nutrition world. And then I also added some resources here on just some places you can get some good information. So the three on the my left here are just some like websites with some really basic information, great place to refer patients to. Food Systems, the Center for a Livable Future is a really great resource. For food policy, which is something that we got to discuss in our first Food as Medicine group too. Different food policy kind of occurs at the state level a lot. And that's a good website to start there. And then Good and Cheap. So that's a really, really great resource. It's a free PDF online, and it's she went through and she made an entire book on eating on $4 a day, which is, within the average like SNAP benefits. And I think she's updated it a few times, but it's still completely free, which is a really, great thing to have in clinic or to refer patients to for online. For nutrition, education, and medical school, which is another thing our Food as Medicine group talked quite a lot about. There's culinarymedicine.org, and there's many other websites out there too, talking about different curriculum options. But that's something I would, really encourage your school to get involved in, is making sure that we have some curriculum options as a student to learn more about nutrition, because we know that at most medical schools, those options are really limited. And then for nutrition counseling, I've already mentioned the Ellen Satter Institute, but again, she has some really great resources. She has some great books that I would highly recommend on, counseling or working with families.
And Jill, I see a great question in the chat from Cindy Martinez asking about how to approach or educate a patient that might ask about the intermittent fasting concept.
Yeah, absolutely. This one has been very, very popular as well. I think that the, kind of verdict is still out there for what its long-term effects are. They're trying to do a lot of studies on like, what does it affect as far as like blood sugar control or, long-term, insulin levels, those sorts of things. But, pros, it might help patients eat within a certain period if they're really struggling with late night snacking. Maybe that's something that they would prefer to do. They don't really eat breakfast anyway, so they're already mostly eating between 12 and 8 p.m. or 10 and 5. There's a couple different ways that you can do it, so you want to make sure that you talk to your patient about which way that they're doing. So are they doing like the 16 hours off, 8 hours on method? There's some people who do like 2 full days of fasting and 5 days of kind of a more normal eating every week. So kind of ask them about that. And then pitfalls, for patients, especially patients who may have like a history of diabetes or have conditions that could lead them to hypoglycemia. It could put some patients in a dangerous situation. So you need to make sure that you're discussing those things with them. And then also just discussing like, well, is it reasonable for your life to do this? Does your life work like this? Or is it, more likely that if we have like a traditional like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack option, that might fit your lifestyle better in the long run? Because, if you only eat 8 hours a day, sometimes those hours don't always fall to whenever you're seeing friends or family and those sorts of things. And, eating is, a part of pretty much every culture. So, it can be a part of that. So. What other questions do you guys have? Or have you ever had any, questions that threw you off from patients or anything you all wanted to discuss? No. Okay. Well,
Go to the next slide if you want.
yes.
Since we are coming up on the 8 o'clock hour, and I am one of those people who's really time sensitive, I thought I would go ahead and give everyone a quick peek about a new webinar that we've added also for students. We're really blessed to have amazing student leaders such as Jill, who had so much knowledge to share on a specific topic. And so the next topic we're going to talk about with our student members is trauma-informed healthcare. And that is going to come to us from a Rush third-year student, Stephanie Moss, who not only has a lot of education knowledge about it, she also has a lot of personal experience on the topic. So there's the date, the time, and it'll be up on our website to register in advance. And you can learn more about the topic at Stephanie has a website. You can see at the bottom there, medpsychmoss.com. So we're looking forward to showcasing some more of our incredible students with their knowledge and experience. Then you can go to the next slide. And if Leah Beth, or if Carter will allow Leah Beth to come out and play for a minute or two, here's some things that are coming up with IAFP and AAFP. And as one of our student board members, Leah Beth is one of the experts on these, on all these events. So I'm gonna hang on for a second and see if she's able to unmute and fill you in on some of these upcoming opportunities. There she comes.
We're here. Carter is loving it so much he got hungry himself. So, but yes, what did you want me to talk about?
We've got the slide up about student leader applications. And since you have gone through that process and have represented our state at AAFP National Conference, can you fill in a little bit about what that entails?
Yeah, so I actually had the privilege of 1 year going to the AAFP, or the National Conference for Students and Residents, in person back when I was a first-year medical student. I'm not sure if it'll be in person this year or not. I haven't heard. I know things are.
They're planning on it. Planning on it.
But I know that we've said that in the past, and it didn't happen. So my experience is a little bit different because they didn't do resolutions the year that I was the voting delegate, but this past year they did, and I really got involved in the resolution writing process. They talked a little bit about food policy tonight. If there's something that you're interested in policy wise, serving as a delegate for the AFP is a great way to get involved, and you can do that if you apply for student leadership. So I would encourage you, even if you're remotely interested, to give it a shot. It's been a great experience.
Okay, well, thank you so much. The other options on the agenda, Essential Evidence is a live event at UIC, and it is free for students. It's kind of a rapid fire update on the most popular or up-to-date topics in primary care. And we will have our White Sox game again. I just got the date locked in this week, so we're excited about that. It's always fun. It was the only live event we've had since the pandemic began. So with that, it is 8 o'clock. I will hang out here for a minute or two. Jill and Dr. Wells, if you could hang for a minute or two, if anyone has any other questions, but otherwise, thank you so much. We hope to see you in April.
I did just want to say, if anybody does have any questions about IFP student leadership, please, you can send Ginny an email. We're working on making a student email as well. And if you guys have any ideas for things that you'd like to see, we are hoping to do a couple in-person student events, whether that be before the White Sox game or, talking about resolutions before the conference, that sort of thing. So please give us any feedback that you might have, and we'd be happy to try to work something out. Thank you guys all for coming.